Good evening and welcome to African Voices platform. My name is Chiwe Chihana. I'll be your host tonight. And my guest is Dr. Anita Franklin. Good evening, Anita.
Good evening, Chewy. Always, it's a delight. It's terrific to be invited. Thank you very much.
It's always an honor to have you. I think we always end up getting a lot more from you than we planned for. There's so much wisdom every time we speak to you, so I'm really looking forward to this one.
Thank you.
You're welcome. We have lots to catch up on, Anita. We haven't spoken to each other in forever. People haven't seen you on the show in a very long time now, and you've been getting on with a lot of things. So specifically today, we want to talk about the work you've been doing on the legend that is Mary McLeod Bethune. And
Mary McLeod Bethune. I know it's very difficult kind of working out all of these names and things, but no, it's quite all right. Mary McLeod Bethune, absolutely. I'm really keen to share, what it is that that I've been working on. And then we also have the world, and everything that's going on right now with the Nationality Act. Is that what they're playing?
I think the Borders Bill.
Borders Bill, that's it. The Borders Bill. We've got all of this together.
We've got all that. We've got COVID. We've got red list countries, but we've got the magnificent. I'm going to try and pronounce it properly now. So Mary McLeod.
McLeod.
McLeod. It's not McLeod.
Yes.
Oh,
I know. It's one of these things where. It's a Celtic name, it's a Scots name. And so even though it's Leod, it's pronounced McLeod.
Right, thank you very much. You
learn
something every day.
The last name is Bethune, which of course, that could have been a Scots name as well, the Bethunes, or it could be French. But McLeod is her maternal what is it, maiden name? That's
maiden. Maiden name. It suddenly sounds so weird when you say it, but yes, that's her maiden name.
Yeah, it's her maiden name. Yeah. Right. Yeah.
So before we actually do get into Mary, into the actual dramatizations that you've been doing. So how did you I believe you've been working with Dr. Amanda Huxtable. Is Amanda a doctor, actually? I'm not sure.
I'm the one who's the academic.
Okay, as well. So you've been working with Amanda Huxtable.
Myself and Mary are the academics in that sense. And, Mary McLeod Bethune has come to me because when I was growing up, my mother, being a teacher, was very much influenced by Mary McLeod Bethune herself. So when you're a little child and, if you were caught in a lie or something like that, my mother would say, what would Mary McLeod Bethune say? It would be, she was known for her integrity. You see, she was known for her integrity. She was known as a person of great character, as well as someone who did a lot that we kind of take for granted now. There's a lot of things that go on in the US. We kind of take them for granted. We don't realize that actually, before there was the civil rights movement, there were other people who were working around trying to have, rights, the right to vote, the right to live where you like, the right to education. These sorts of things, people have been fighting for them for quite some time. And so Mary McLeod Bethune is a part of that kind of bedrock on which you then build the civil rights movement and various other things that have happened since the civil rights movement. Yeah.
Brilliant. So to give some context for those who've not played your first episode, which I've been very privileged to have listened to, the dramatization, let's give some personality. So Mary is an African-American activist. She was born in 1875.
She was born in 1875, and she was the 16th of 17 children, and she was born in the American South. She was born not that far away from where my own mother was born, in South Carolina. And she was, as someone who was a part of that generation who, born during the time of the newly emancipated, I think that generation felt for themselves that they had a lot they needed to accomplish. And certainly she was someone who, like many people of that generation, did a lot of work, did a lot of the work that, again, today we've forgotten. We've forgotten. So, for example, when slavery was over, no one built schools really for Black people. Yeah. You had some missionaries who would open up a school or two, but it's few and far between, because it was very difficult work coming from the North down South, as for instance, a white couple might do, and setting up a school for Black kids. And you just didn't have enough of them, but you had a few. Yeah. And Mary McLeod Bethune was one of those people who went to a mission school. Okay.
Right.
But in general, we didn't have any schools. And where we lived at the time was mostly in the American South, which had lost the war. And so they weren't keen on creating schools for us, because it had been during the time of slavery, and slavery was 400 years, illegal for Black people to know how to read and write.
A fact that we often forget is just how long the slavery period was.
People forget how long that was. This is, from 1610.
Very long time. A very long time.
And to be living in circumstances where it is dangerous for you to show that you might know how to read or write, even if you had a master who is interested in doing that. But so this is where we are. Once slavery is over, we had to make our own schools. And that is what we did. And Mary McLeod Bethune is one of those people. The first thing that she did was she was one of those people who created schools. And there are many people who did this. So Mary McLeod Bethune is not the only person who was doing it. But she did this, and she did it in Florida. She did it in Daytona, Florida. And this school today is now a university. It is a 4-year accredited university called Bethune-Cookman College. Okay.
Yeah.
So this is a person who went from her family being ex-slaves and then sharecroppers, and then she creates a school. She manages to get an education herself, and then she creates a school and begins to educate other people, especially teachers and nurses as well. Because one of the other things that she did was she created a hospital. Because again, because of racism and what was called Jim Crow segregation laws, if something had happened to Black people, they couldn't use the white hospitals. So she created a hospital in Florida, in Daytona.
Right.
Because otherwise we were just dying on the street,
Right.
And that was called McLeod Hospital. And one of the things to take on board about that hospital is that when there was that dreadful flu in 1915, what they call the Spanish flu, her hospital allowed in white people as well as Black people. Rather than
an amazing, phenomenal woman that we should know about more than what we currently know. And I'm learning so much from just reading some of this. I've had to, because of you, I've had to pull up a lot of her stories.
Yeah.
Why did I not know about her? So,
well, and the other thing is, as you know, the other thing is she then becomes someone who sets up a national organization of African American women, which still exists today. She set up, how would I put it, the political kind of infrastructure, which has allowed African Americans to continue to have some say in relation to the Democratic Party. Before Mary McLeod Bethune and her advisory position with Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who was president for a long time in the US before we had a cutoff point, and Harry Truman, who was president during the time of World War II. She'd been an advisor, and she was someone who was beginning to become known as a stateswoman. And she had a relationship with many other Black politicians. I hasten to not call them politicians because it makes it sound like there was a lot of voting and things like that. We were still in a situation where we were having to fight for the right to vote.
Political activists, maybe? Is that
maybe we would call them activists, but they tended to be
policymakers as well?
Union. They tended to be people in a union, people who were publishers, newspaper publishers, people who were, sometimes they were religious people, like ministers and what have you. But a lot of it was people who had Black newspapers. So it's a whole group of people. And so, for instance, she knew W.E.B. Du Bois, who was a Black sociologist. She knew Langston Hughes, who of course was a Black poet and a highly regarded intellectual of the Harlem Renaissance. She knew Zora Neale Hurston, Alan Locke, all of these people who were important intellectuals and who had the ear of liberal white America.
All right.
And what's interesting about Mary McLeod Bethune, I would say, is she never moved north, which was the tendency. Like a lot of times you get a little bit of power, you get a little bit of power, you move to London,
You go for the power,
London. And it's kind of like, she didn't do that. She always stayed, in terms of her home, she stayed in Florida. She stayed in the South. She stayed in the trenches.
Where you needed to be, really, to fight the fight.
Well, from her point of view, she was interested in what the situation would be for ordinary people, as opposed to maybe the very middle class people who had choices,
So, Anita, you and Amanda look at the dramatization of Mary's life, and you launch it during Black History Month in the UK. So me, Anita, from all our conversations, I'm very much of the African diaspora is the African diaspora in its full sense of you are with American, Caribbean, but how is Mary's story interacting with the UK, where it's Black History Month in the UK? How have you found it, especially that you launched it at such a critical time? What's the reception been like as well for that first episode?
Well, the reception has been very interesting because, one of the things is, once again, everybody says, how come I don't know about this woman? And are you going to release the whole thing, the whole play on a podcast? So the reception has been very good, very positive. Once people find out who she is, as you say, it's almost then that the conversation starts, because people then go, I don't understand how come, I know about Martin Luther King, or I know about this person, and I don't understand why I don't know about this woman, And so one of the things about the podcast is that we have we have a conversation sitting inside of the podcasts, which are about the issues that the play that I wrote bring up, but also in some sense hint at why we do not know about her. We don't know about her. A friend of mine would say, who is a novelist and a very, well, I would say highly regarded writer and feminist, and that's Desiree Reynolds. She
Yes,
says,
yeah.
well, we don't know about her because she's a woman.
That's what I was just going to say. Because she's a
That
woman.
part of it is just the fact she's a woman. So we don't know enough about what women bring to our struggle. And in the white world, in the mainstream world as well, don't know about what women are doing. So in the United States, for example, we have this business of Social Security. So like, pensions, whatever. All of that was started by a woman. Nobody knows. Nobody knows it.
No.
We tend to just kind of ignore that. There's a woman called Frances Perkins that started all of that. Again, alive at around the same time as Mary McLeod Bethune.
Right.
So that's part of it. We also don't know about Mary McLeod Bethune because we now live in a world which is about individualism and is about everybody kind of showing themselves and saying, this is what I did and this and this and this. And she wasn't like that. Her entire way of being was to say, I am actually helpless without your fellowship and cooperation. So her entire thing was not about me, it was about we. And she was very interested in working behind the scenes. So she was very transparent, and she wrote every week about what she was doing in newspapers and that sort of thing. But she was not someone who was a celebrity. And nowadays everything is about a celebrity, isn't it? But back then it wasn't. She was simply a teacher. She was simply an educator. She was simply an advisor. She was simply someone who, well, I try to do the best I can, So there's a kind of humility, and there's a sense of being accountable to other people. And we don't have a lot of that right now. People are really thinking about themselves a lot, And so that's part of the reason why we don't know about her as well, because it's a different world. We had what was called the Black Cabinet. That was an unofficial grouping of around often 12, sometimes 15 Black leaders who were not politicians. They were advisors to presidents. And those people, they had to be accountable to the Black community, because the Black community then knew who they were, chased them up, all of that. But today, many of us, Mary McLeod Bethune would probably be the most famous of the people in that Black cabinet. But she would say, there's no way I could have done what I did in relation to advising the president, unless I'd had those people's fellowship and cooperation and their connection to Black community. So one of the things that's important that she accomplished was the stuff around making sure that Black women had a national organization of their own, making sure that historically Black colleges and universities had a kind of vehicle for fundraising and for protecting themselves. She also helped in terms of the administration of the NAACP, which still exists today and which is still very important in terms of legal cases and protecting African Americans. And what does it mean for Britain? Well, what it means for Britain is, first of all, she was very international. So she visited Britain.
Yeah.
She received a Medal of Honor from Liberia and a Medal of Honor from Haiti. So she was very much a Pan-Africanist with a small p.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So what does this all mean for Britain? Well, in Britain, is a place that is full of Black people, and she would be very interested in asking, so what are your organizations like in this country?
Yeah.
What organizations do you have that are protecting you from, for example, various kinds of legislation which is coming about, which is actually harmful to you? What organizations are there? Tell me about them, and tell me about your relationship to them. How can we work together?
Yeah, absolutely. In that vein, one of the things that most struck me about Mary's work is the her direct engagement with the challenges that were brought on by the Ku Klux Klan. I would like to learn more about that. What exactly was she doing in relation to that? How was she challenging the Ku Klux Klan?
Well, she never, as it were, challenged them. She simply resisted them. See, one of the things that I think is really important is they don't have a lot of photos of Mary McLeod Bethune marching with, with protest signs. And it's because she did do some of that, but she considered that to be not the central work that she could do, that her main thing was to build something that was useful to the Black community. So, and she would never say
that wait, the minute you say that, I like how this resonates with me in relation to people like you and Desiree and the stuff that you're building for our communities. So just a nod to that. That's brilliant that she did that.
And that's the thing. We all have our part to play. All have our part to play. And one of the great things about her is she worked with people who she disagreed with and who disagreed with her. In the podcast and in the play, the full-length play that I've written, I have Zora Neale Hurston in there. I also have W.E.B. Du Bois in there as well. And these are people who have different backgrounds to her and different views. And, someone like Zora Neale Hurston, for example, would be less interested in what she would call integration or working across racial lines in this kind of way. She's less interested in that. She doesn't have the time. Her whole thing is, if you don't want to hang out with me, that's fine. I go my own way. That's how she felt. And the whole business of the separation of Black from white, in that sense, did not bother her in the least, because she had a Black society. Black society was very strong. And so that is what she worked on. Now, Mary McLeod Bethune was someone who kind of understood that. And she built a school. It was a Black school. It became a Black university, not because she was keeping white people out, but because it was seen as a Black university. So white people didn't go. Now today, guess what? White people are in Bethune-Cookman College because white people are inside of the historically Black colleges and universities. Yeah.
Anita, Thanks for that. You'll come back and finish that off. I'm sorry I cut you
Okay.
off, but I would love for you as well, as you go on, to tell me more about the actual play in its fullness, what the vision is for it, and what the vision is for it. And then give us a little bit of insight into episode 2. You told me that you've just been listening to it again today. Just what should people expect from it?
In relation to the podcast, I wrote a play, and this play is, ready to go as a one-woman show. And I wrote it because, having left the academy, I wanted to do something that honored her, because my ability to survive what I went through in the academy for over 35 years, I owe to a particular tradition, which has allowed me to see myself in these spaces and to understand that I can survive them, and to not be so kind of disappointed or surprised that I was treated so badly, but to understand that that's a part of what it is in this world at the moment. Someone like Mary McLeod Bethune, someone like W.E. Du Bois, people like Langston Hughes, Zora Neale Hurston, my knowledge of these people have helped me to survive and to not think that I am somehow alone, or whatever. And you have to ask yourself, okay, so Anita, where did you get all of that information? And some of it came from my mother and the nature of the family that I was born into, which was a family that prized education. But we never, ever remain dependent upon the state education system of the United States to teach me my history.
That's powerful.
Why would you expect the oppressor to teach you your history? Where do people get off on that? What is that? So education is important, but it is never just the education of the state. It is always the education that your parents are giving you. It is the education you might get from a Saturday supplementary school. It's the education that you might get from your own hunger, knowledge, to seek out the books and the role models that make some sense for you. Yeah. So I, in some sense, wanted to honor that.
Yeah.
That this person helped me to survive. And that's why I wrote this play. So this play exists, and hopefully one day it'll be on stage. I think Amanda has, is working on making sure that it tours in the North, but everything is contingent on the pandemic. Yeah. Everything is contingent on the pandemic. What I'm wanting is I'm wanting to make it something that gets streamed, so that people do not have to kind of travel from here or there or whatever. I would like it to be something that, in terms of the podcasts and what have you, is something that young people can access.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This thing is not just about entertainment.
I suppose what the pandemic has done is given us this advantage where it's not just people within one location that can interact with something as powerful as what you've written. It's people from all over the world. For example, your podcast, I'm sure, is going to be listened to by so many people. And if it's going to be a streamed play, then absolutely, I see that. And the people who need to hear it, I think we have this moment where we still have people like you that can pass on knowledge. And we should.
We have to do that. We have to continue to do that. Just because I have left the academy doesn't mean that my knowledge has
Has remained
oozed
there.
out of me. And I just think that it's extraordinary, this situation where there are so many people who have the ability to educate.
Mhm.
And when you have the ability to educate, you also have the ability to heal. Because a lot of the stuff that is wrong with many of us in our communities is because we have been either miseducated, poorly educated, or not had access to it. And so we need to kind of do this. And certainly that's what I feel that I'm doing. I feel this is the part of my life where part of what I do is I continue to educate, but I do it through stories.
Thank you. I think that's a very good way to get into this next bit of our conversation, talking about identity, who we are, our narrative, passing on history, and how we identify. Just last week, the government here in the United Kingdom had a debate on the Nationality and Borders Bill, and in essence, it gives the government the right to deprive British people of their citizenship without informing them first. What are your thoughts? What was your initial reaction to this?
Well, my initial reaction was very much that this was a continuation of work that had been started during the time that Theresa May was Home Secretary. So we're going back to 2014. We're going back to the creation of what we now call the hostile environment set of policies, because that's what they are. It's a set of policies that work together to create a hostile environment for many people who are born in this country, even, let alone those who perhaps were not born here, but who are British citizens afterwards. So it's all very, very interesting. But it's the culmination of something, you know what I mean? And so on the one hand, I think it feels quite shocking. But on the other hand, it is the case that the government already had the right to deprive people of their citizenship. And it was, again, a bit shocking that the way that they used this or tested it out was in relation to Shamima Begum. How old was that child? Was she 15? I think
she was 15, I think. I believe she was 15.
She's a minor. She's a minor. And she went and she did, and not only did she become an ISIS bride, she was an ISIS bride amongst a whole heap of other ISIS brides. You know what I mean? So we're not just talking about, oh, well, she was the only one. But it is the case that for whatever reason, this woman has been chosen, she's been selected to bear the burden of having lost her citizenship, rather than having brought home, answering in a court of law, you know what I mean, due process, that everybody else who, if you're going to charge people with particular crimes and what have you, that's what you do. But it feels like that what's happening now is there's certain groups of people who they're not going to be allowed due process because they can have their citizenship not only taken off of them in a unilateral move, but if they may not be notified of it. They may not be notified of it. And indeed, you don't even know when it is that when it will become effective from. So it can be retrospective. So this means that with it being retrospective, your rights to appeal are very iffy, very you know, you're not standing on a stable ground, because if you don't know exactly when it is that your citizenship was revoked, then again, your right to appeal will be up in the air. You know, you may not have the right to appeal if it was revoked sufficiently far enough back.
Right. So I mean, what we do know for sure is that not too long ago, and I believe this was probably when the counterterrorism measures were outlined. At that point, I think if you had dual citizenship, it was the government was able to strip you of the British nationality. But like the case you're talking about, for example, like Shamima Begum's is even worse in the sense that she's got no other citizenship.
She has no other citizenship. Exactly. No, and I think that, again, this is one of the things that this particular bit of stuff has nothing to do with that. If you do have dual citizenship, or if you have the right to dual citizenship, then maybe go for it. But a lot of places, of course, do not actually want you to have that. And I would not be surprised if Britain begins to move towards a system where, again, dual citizenship will be reserved for particular groups of people.
I mean,
file people. You know what I mean?
It's already estimated by the some media outlets, including the New Statesman, that at least every 2 in 5 people who are not of white British heritage are at risk of losing their citizenship under the new amendments to the bill.
Yes, that's right. That's what I'm saying. It's, it will be particular people. So yes, this is definitely something that, again, to just go back into stuff about Mary McLeod Bethune, she would be very interested in asking people in this country, so which organizations are you connected to and that you are supporting who are fighting this? And, again, I look up as a person living in modern day Britain today, and I just kind of go, because there are some, as it were, charities around who actually take on casework, and those things are very important, but it keeps everybody in a silo. People are isolated with their own particular case.
If it's I get it. I get what you're saying. So if it's refugees and how it affects refugees, but in totality, what's the wholesome picture? How are we fighting this together? And because we're in isolated pockets, then our voice is minimized. I hear.
Exactly. And as long as everything is always about everybody's individual case, then it's never then something that can build sufficient momentum to help everyone. So I think that is one of the things, part of why Vanitas Arts, the company that I'm working with in terms of the manifesto of Shirley Harris, that's why we do the work that we do, because a big part of what we're trying to do with our art is to get people to be thinking about organizations. Which organizations are you going to be a part of? If the organization doesn't exist, are you going to create one? You and who? What are we going to do? Because right now there's a lot of, I think, energy about everybody's angry. People are furious, but there are not enough structures. There's not enough infrastructure in organizations for people to feed that energy.
Like, where do you channel your fury so that it yields something tangible outcomes? What are the outcomes?
Yes.
So when you say that, I'm thinking more that we are not doing a good job of movement building then. I think in the past,
Absolutely.
movements were being built. We are not doing
Yeah.
a good job of movement building because of these same silos that we're talking about.
Yes. Yes.
And
And
so tell me more then about Vanitas Arts, because I hadn't heard of them until I heard about Mary McLeod. So who is Vanitas Arts? What's the story behind?
well, Vanitas Arts is basically about digital storytelling.
Hmm.
And, you know, at this point, especially, I mean, you know, Vanitas Arts also does in real life theater as well. And there was work, for instance, you know, the poet Jackie Kay.
Oh, I worked with
She-
Jackie K years ago. Yeah, absolutely.
yeah. And Jackie Kay has this book called Trumpet, which is based on a real life instance of a trans man and who was a jazz musician.
Mm-hmm.
And that story is again one of these stories that um, you know, had been forgotten in terms of Britain's relationship to jazz and also to transgender history. And that story is something that Jackie Kay, you know, is written about, and Vanitas Arts has put it on and is continuing to develop it. Yeah. So Vanitas Arts is interested in these stories that have been forgotten, but which
Yeah,
actually can help us shed a light on the stuff that is actually happening today. So that's the key. The key is we're not just here to entertain you, although we want to entertain you, but we're here as well to try and get you to think and to kind of understand that Britain, as well as the US, has never, ever been a single storied place. It has never been homogeneous. It's always been heterogeneous, you know. It's always been full of texture and rich stories. And we can still learn from those stories today.
absolutely. That's so I get to be fortunate enough to work with women like yourself, Desiree, Amanda through Utopia as well. I am wondering how. I'm curious. I just want to feel the energy of you three sitting down in a room, in a space, and working on this particular project. How has that been? Just the three of you talking to each other about this, and what are you feeling you're bringing to us? Like, I want to feel that
Well,
tangible.
in terms of Shirley and Amanda and myself,
Mhm.
sitting down talking about things, we can talk for hours. That's one of the things. And yes, we have many more projects
Yeah.
that we are working on, and they are projects which relate to um, which relate to our blackness. They relate to our gender. They relate to our sexuality. They relate to class issues. They relate to the global situation.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and they're all as well quite historical. That's the thing. We will not be infantilized. We're not just about what happened over the past 2 years. You know,
We have we have
we
a
are
reason.
we
We
are
are more
about
than that.
exactly. We are about what happened, you know, 100 years ago. We're interested in that and in kind of understanding that we have been a part of history and we have been progressive in our relationship to history um, for a long time. So that's what we are about. Yeah.
Brilliant. And maybe just one more reflection on the state of the of culture, arts, and heritage at the moment in the UK.
Mhm.
Um, we took quite a knocking, I think, during the pandemic, at the height of the pandemic,
Mhm.
starting to recover. What are your thoughts about the way forward going from next year, and especially when it comes to minoritized groups and the arts and culture and heritage there?
Well,
it's 2022 next year.
I know. On the one hand, I understand what you're saying, that perhaps we feel like we've taken a knock because there is less certainty. And with less certainty, there's less money and there's inability to plan.
But there's been opportunity as well, so I shouldn't discard
exactly.
that. I should not.
And that is what I want to say. I want to say that I have also felt that it has been an opportunity to think and to work regardless, to produce regardless. And sometimes I look and I just kind of go, oh, isn't it interesting? You know, they're busy trying to dangle things in front of us because, yeah, they know, the powers that be know that we are the innovators. It's our stories that are new and that have not been sufficiently told before. So
do you just want to say that again, please? I just want that to say it once more, one more time, please.
I think that there are lots of people going to be around scooping up what they see, you know, filtering, and
but I hope we've learned. I hope we've learned to harness what we've got and value it. And put it out there for value.
Yes, because again, we are the ones who are, when life gets funny, there's a tendency to kind of come to us and say, oh, so what are you up to? And they kind of peer and look in what we're doing, you know, and so, yeah, we'll be propping it up. Okay. And so that's why I say it's just important for us to keep working. I'm hoping that what we do is we try to consolidate and work with each other rather than allow things to fizzle out. And in that sense, they're unprotected. And when work is unprotected, we are easily exploited. So I hope that we can be a bit better at consolidating things. But if you look around right now at, for instance, what's going on with Hollywood, have you noticed that there's a tendency to be remaking, rebooting, rebooting? They're going over the same material over and over again because they don't know any other stories. We're the ones
with the stories that haven't been told. Yes.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
And so we have to consolidate that. And we have to be very clear when people come to us for our stuff. We have to be very clear and we have to get ourselves protected and we have to make sure that we're not being used or exploited. Because, yeah, I just think that at the end of the day, we're the future.
Absolutely. Anita, that's just amazing. So I've got lots to take away, as always, and I never want to stop. I'm mostly listening. I'm just going like, wow, yeah. But tell us again, the next episode. We need to talk about the next episode.
Yes, the next episode is out in a few days. So, for instance, today, when we're speaking, it's now Tuesday, isn't it?
It's Tuesday, yeah.
So by Friday, go to the website again, and you will find episode 2. And again, episode 2 is a mix of what is in the play and some conversation, Black women-led conversation about the issues that have come up in Mary McLeod Bethune's life and times.
How many episodes are there going to be of the podcast?
There are 3 episodes which have, as it were, her, me performing and which feature my writing and the conversations with Amanda, Desiree, and myself. But then there's a fourth episode, which is more of a participatory episode. So do not be surprised if you find yourself invited.
Oh my God. I'm excited. I'm definitely going to jump on that one. And I'm going to jump.
Yeah.
But almost, do you know what I feel like doing right now? I just want to listen to the second one before it's actually out. So if you treat me to that, I'll be very happy.
So I don't actually have it. Again, it's one of these things that is sitting with Amanda. But like I said, on Friday, it definitely comes out. And then and like I said, episode 4.
Wow.
Everything will be on the website. Everything, including the timeline, a lot of the resources where people can kind of go and read more about Mary McLeod Bethune, because so much of what is important to her is the things that she accomplished. We only talk about it a little bit in the play because you can't put everything in. You can't put everything in. You just have to, in the play and in the podcast, give a feel of, well, what thematically was she dealing with? And so some of the stuff that she's dealing with is fear. And then some of the other stuff she's dealing with is hope. Yeah. And then some of the stuff that she's dealing with is about the importance of organization, and also the importance of knowing when to say goodbye, and knowing how to say goodbye, which is to say, to hand off over to the next person to do things, rather than, it being about me, staying with something, to the bitter end. She was very good at delegating, and saying, well, I've done what I can here,
Yeah. And that is that how she arrived at "I leave you love"? Is that what it was? Is that the essence?
Yeah, "I leave you love." That's a part of her will. That's part of her last will and testament. Yeah, and I think that's an important thing in terms of the movement that you're talking about. We need a movement that is one where there is delegation, there is discipline, and there is also a sense of knowing when to hand over, knowing when to knowing how to hand over before a person is too old or too corrupted or whatever it is, because this is one of the things that I think goes on in the modern world. In the modern world, it's so much I, and it's like, it's not about you.
It's beyond you. It's above you. It's more than just you. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah,
and that's the thing about her. She did not believe that greatness was something that sat inside of individuals. She believed that, the line I have in the play is that greatness is reserved for God. And that, as individuals, we're simply a part of something. We're not above anything. It's so hard for people nowadays to
accept, understand, embrace. We are not thinking people powered. We are always thinking individuals. That is it. Yeah. Dr. Franklin, always a pleasure having you on African Voices platform. Thanks so much, and looking forward to the rest of the episodes.
Thank you, and you look after yourself. And thank you again for having me on your show.